Okay, this is the Bulletproof Bookkeeping webinar for July 15th, 2020. We're going to talk about SaasAnt import. Susan, I believe this was based on one of your questions specifically.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about this, speaking from a recent experience I had with a client who, they run an IT company. It's a big IT company. And they use a project management app that's apparently commonly used in the IT world. It's called Plutio. You may have heard of it. But it doesn't integrate directly with QBO. And I, of course, had the conversation with them about considering, options that might, because among other things, they were using it to track time. That was where the integration became important, is they wanted to be able to get the time data out of Plutio and into QuickBooks Online. They wanted to do it sort of seamlessly and efficiently. And there was no easy way to do that. And so I said, well, are you married to Plutio? Because if not, there's T-Sheets. And there's a lot of other applications out there that'll track time and sync it directly to QBO. But the bottom line was Plutio had a lot of other things that they were using and doing. There were a lot of other things they were doing with it that they didn't want to leave Plutio. They really liked the platform. And it actually prompted me to take a look at it myself, and I could see what they mean. I like it. It's a nice project management system that does have a really good sort of time management capability. And bottom line, they have a lot of contractors who use it to track their time on all the different projects that they work on, and they're able to manage all that very seamlessly in Plutio. So the bottom line was, he convinced me that he had good reason for not wanting to change up the apps. He wanted to stick with what he had, and he had seen a video or two of mine on SaasAnt, so he thought maybe SaasAnt could do the trick. And it turns out it did it, and it did it quite well. So, and the reality is, bigger picture, doing this kind of bookkeeping work, it really ends up being, especially this day and age, this wasn't true 10 years ago, but definitely this day and age, it's about moving data, right? That's what our clients need. They need data, and we need to be able to move it for them so that it lands in the right place, so that we can get a bulletproof balance sheet and P&L and statement of cash flows, right? We really want to be able to analyze the numbers for them. So these guys needed a process where they could take the time data that was in Plutio and get it imported quickly, and they needed to use it two ways. They needed to be able to bill their clients for the time, and they needed to pay their contractors. For an added bit of complexity, they might have two or more individuals working for the same company as contractors. So when the time data comes in, we have the individual who did the work, but we needed a way to map them to the company that they work for, because ultimately the bill that goes into QBO needs to go to that company, and that's who needs to get paid, and it needs to get paid in total for all the contractors. So what we did was, the first thing I always do on something like this is I said, let's go into Plutio and let's look at the reports that we can run that has all of the time data, all the information we need, and let's make sure we can export that to Excel. And we did, and we ran the report, and there were lots of columns in the report. And the bottom line is, when you're going to do this kind of thing, what you'll want to do is start off with a template where the first, however many columns there are that come out of that export, we need to keep it formatted in the same way, right? So we have to create a template that's based exactly on how it looks when it comes out of the source, which in this case was Plutio. And then what we can do is we can add columns onto the end of that, right? And what I'm driving at here, the point is that we want to be able to run that report every week or however often we need to, export that into a fresh Excel sheet, and just copy and paste it into our template. And then the template does the rest of the work. Then so that we add columns to the right that do the lookups or calculations, whatever we need to do. So as quickly as we can paste that data into the template's ready. We paste it into the template, we drag it into SaasAnt, we map the import the first time in SaasAnt, test it, make sure it's working. So once that's all set up,
Charlie.
Sorry? I thought somebody said something. So once we get that setup done, it's as easy as exporting the data from the source, copying and pasting it into Excel, saving that, clicking and dragging Excel over in SaasAnt. The mapping is going to be saved. So pretty much at that point, we can just click the button to import that stuff. And I have a call. I'm going to actually pull out an excerpt of the recording I have of a call I recently did with this very client that I'm referring to, where we kind of got the final piece of it done, and his reaction was classic. And he told me that the process I helped him build literally took hours and turned it into minutes twice a month. Every time he has to do payroll, he doesn't need his bookkeeper to do this part anymore. He does it himself, and he actually enjoys it. He likes the process. So that's huge. So that's what I kind of want to walk you through today and show you. And I've created I tweaked the version of the template that I built for this client, right? I changed a few things around. And so I want to show you how to build this kind of template in Excel. Like I said, initially, this is based on exactly how things come out of Plutio. So the first column out of Plutio is the person, right? That's the person who's doing the work. Then there's a task in Plutio, which initially we were going to sort of map the task to his products and services list in QBO. Turns out he didn't need to do that. He just didn't need all that detail. So in his case, we ended up using one task to describe it all. That's fine. That was totally up to him, right? But normally that's what I would do, is I would plan on the task being the thing that ends up being used as the product or service in QBO. I think the reason he didn't want to is in Plutio, they have lots of different kinds of tasks for all different kinds of things, and he didn't want all that detail in QBO, which made sense, right? The next thing that comes in is going to be the project, right? So that comes in from Plutio, and we want to make sure, and part of the job we had to do with this client in the beginning was to sync up the projects in Plutio exactly with how they appear in QuickBooks Online, right? So the project here has to be exactly the same. We weren't using actual projects, we were using sub-customers, right? So we needed to make sure that there's a project with the exact same name in here, right? Now we're going to find out in a few minutes when I do the import. SaasAnt will create a new project if it's not already in there, right? And so in his case, though, he already had the projects in both places. And so we were, I saw right away that we were going to get a lot of duplicate versions of the same project. So I had them kind of take an export of the project list from QuickBooks Online and clean all that up in Plutio, so that between the two different sources, the lists were exactly matched up. And then we didn't get any duplicates, right? Then everything mapped perfectly when we do the import to the right project. Now this comes in from Plutio, as a field. In this case, I actually wrote a formula that's based on the start and finish time, right? So Plutio also brings in, and this is how they term it, started at, finished at, right? So what I did, just for fun, really, was I wrote a formula that says take the finish time minus the starting time and describe it in terms of minutes, right? I just wanted, because in his case, he needed that. He needed the total minutes. Further out to the right, we convert that into a breakdown of how many hours and how many minutes that equates to, right? So again, more formulas, nothing terribly complicated. When you're looking at time in Excel, it's based on a 24-hour clock. So the numbers you're working with, when I take 10:40 a.m. minus 9 a.m., it's in base 24. So to get that into a decimal, you have to multiply it by 24, right? And that gets us the hour version, and then multiplying that by 60 gets me the total minutes. So that's what this formula here does. It just takes the finish time minus the starting time, right? Multiplies it by 24 to get the hours and minutes in decimal format, multiply that by 60 to get it in terms of total minutes, right? And again, this actually, in his case, this came directly out of Plutio. We didn't need to write a formula. That was one of the issues, was Plutio gave us just the total minutes. For me, it was just fun to write a formula to do it based on starting and ending time. So either way, we have the time in several different ways that we can use, right? Next over here, this is the first lookup we had to do, because remember earlier I said we might have 2 or more persons that work for the same contractor. So anytime we accumulate, billing for a contractor, because we're going to use this template to import the bills that need to be paid to the contractors, as well as to import the invoices that are going to go to the customers. We have it all laid out right here. Again, that's what makes this super efficient for the guy. So I created a lookup here. If you look at my tabs at the bottom, I'll skip that second one for a minute. The contractor lookup is here. So if I have a second person who works at Nerd Enterprises, let's say I hire Melissa, right? And she's going to work for me at Nerd Enterprises, okay? Then, oh, Greg's here. Yay, Greg's here. So now what I'm able to do is if I add in a time entry, right?
I'm not that numbers guy. I am the numbers guy.
That's true. I did some variations on some themes here. So in this case, you're that numbers guy.
You know, I'm that tardy guy today.
There you go. So, and while you're, go ahead, keep talking. I need to take a bite of my lunch.
Hey guys, yeah,
Hi, Greg.
placed on this meeting for a little bit today while I was eating my lunch. So, what are we up to? Plutio.
Yeah, we're talking about Plutio as the source of the data that we're exporting into a template that we can use SaasAnt to import into QBO, because Plutio doesn't have a good direct integration with QBO. So that's the use case here. And we want to import a lot of time data so that we can both enter bills to pay our contractors and enter invoices to collect payment from our clients on this stuff. So the quick recap, Greg, of what you missed is I was explaining that I've set up a client of mine with this process where I've turned hours into minutes for him, quite literally. And he remarked as such in our call that we did last week where we kind of finalized this process, because the way we've got this set up, when he exports it in out of Plutio, it's a quick copy and paste into the template. The template looks everything up. And then all we have to do really is drag it over into SaasAnt. The mapping is already saved in SaasAnt. So it's literally like less than 5 minutes from exporting to Plutio to copying it into the template, saving it, dropping it into SaasAnt, and then clicking, just reviewing it quickly, of course, and then clicking the import button, and it's done. So that was taking his former bookkeeper hours and hours to do twice a month every time they wanted to update their billing entries. So we'll have Melissa work on the Bulletproof CFO project, but notice once I put Melissa in here, it looked up the contractor company for me, right? Because that was the other thing, Greg, is this particular client had multiple individuals working for the same contractor company. So billing wise, we have to accumulate that by company, we're not paying the individuals, we're paying the company that they work for. So we had the contractor company in there as a lookup. Okay. And then the track time in minutes again is calculated. In reality, Plutio actually drops that in. It's not a calculated number from Plutio, but I just did that for fun. So let's say Melissa started working at, let's say she's had a lazy morning. She started at 11 a.m. and she worked till like 2:30 p.m. Okay. So it calculates that as a total of 210 minutes, which translates to 3 hours and 30 minutes. Right, and she was just the next entry in that contractor lookup had a bill rate of 75 an hour. Okay, and then the customer we have here as a forward-thinking accountant. Okay, so where did that come from? Because of the project that we chose. Right, so the project I chose for her was Bulletproof CFO, and the customer who has hired us for that project is called Forward Thinking Accountant. So that's the other lookup there that we're using. Once we know what the project is, we know who the customer is. Okay, and then of course it's looking up the customer rate from that same table, and then it's calculating the total billing. Right, this total, it's poorly termed. This total is the total that's being paid to the contractor. Right, this total billing is what we're collecting from the customer. It's the 2,000 times the hour and 40 minutes effectively. Right, and I always test these things to make sure that that makes sense. If I take 2,000 times, is it 1.4? No. No, not 1.4. What's an hour and 40 minutes?
5.6.
I have to take the hour and 40 minutes and convert it into decimal based time, right? So like an hour and a half would be 1.5.
1.66.
So 1.66, right? So that times that should get me the 33 and change, right? It's not exact. The formula does it exactly because it's taking the track time and it's doing a test. If the track time in minutes is 0, then it just shows me a 0. right? Otherwise, it's taking the track time in minutes, right? The total minutes divided by 60 to get it into an hourly decimal, and then multiplying that by the customer rate. So if we take this out here, divided by 60, then we get, you know, the same answer basically, right? And the only reason I laid it out this way is because this is how it comes out of Plutio, right? And that's the key, is we have to build the template so that it's prepared to house the data exactly as it comes out of its source, right? So the source gave us the time in terms of total minutes, so that's what we have to work with. And then, you know, I could have built in a separate column that shows us this decimal version of it, but I didn't feel it was necessary in this case, as long as I know we're getting the right answer. So that's how this gets built. And of course, here I'm manually adding things, right? So normally I wouldn't have a drop down for the person. I just created that drop down, you know, for the purposes of today's exercise, but also to show you that you could very easily build something like this, right? So how did I create this person drop down, which is actually looking at the list of people that are in the contractor lookup tab, right? And the way that I do that is what's called data validation. So I've converted this whole range, as you can tell, some of you can tell, it's set up as what's called a table, right? And if I highlight this whole column, that's, you know, that's the person, I can go to data, and I want to go to the data validation section, which is one of these guys here. I always forget which one exactly it is. There it is. So there's data validation. Okay, and I've set it to allow for a list, and then I've defined the source of that list as being contractor lookup cells A1 through A19. So if I go to contractor lookup, that's basically the first column in this table, right?
Does Smartsheet have that? Data validation?
With Smartsheet, you can create a drop down, but you can't link that drop down to another source. You have to manually build the list that's in the drop down.
Okay. I was just something popped into my head.
Yep. What I've done in cases like that, where I want to create a drop down in Smartsheet like this, where I want to have, let's say, my customer list from QBO in Smartsheet, then I just kind of every once in a while, when I have to update it, I pull the customer list out of QBO and just copy and paste that column into the drop down field that I've created in Smartsheet. So that's how I manage that kind of thing in Smartsheet. So even if your source is going to be something other than Plutio, or where you want to be able to kind of manually or some other way gather the entries, you know, I thought it'd be a cool thing to show you how you can kind of create these drop downs that make it easy, right? You could do a task list. The project, same thing. The project is pulling from this list in projects and customers, and this column A, you know, within this table. All right, before the next step is going to be to show you how to sort of create and map the import, and then to do the import. So any questions so far? Nope. So again, the template's easy to build. You start with however it exports from the source of the data, which in this case, you know, is Plutio. Then what you're going to do is build the columns to the right that you need, like in this case, to look up the customer. Right, so here I'm doing a lookup. So all these kind of lookup columns, and also this total, the hours and the minutes, I don't know why I did it like this. I should just combine this into a single column that converts it back to decimals. But anyway, these are all created, right? This hourly pay rate, which is what the contractor gets paid, you know, again, is looked up. You can look in my formula and see. And when I post the recording of today's webinar, I'll post a copy of this Excel file so you can download it and kind of audit the file and see how the formulas are all done. All right, Greg, you notice what I did with Matthew's company name?
Well, Parkway. I also saw that he does QQQ consulting.
Yes, he does. QQQ loans. All right, so I'm going to save this. And just bear in mind, this is probably obvious, but just in case, what you're about to see from here on out will take the exact same amount of time, whether I have just 6 rows or 600 rows, right? Here I've created space for 100. The point being that it doesn't matter how many line items of data I have in here. Once the process is built, it takes the same exact amount of time, no matter how much stuff is in here. And again, that's the beauty of it. And another reason, by the way, not to be charging by the hour when you're doing this kind of stuff, because you literally are going to turn hours into minutes, which is going to cause you to lose money if you're charging by the hour. Okay. So I'm going to bring this sheet over into my other screen. And now what I want to do is find it in my Windows Explorer files. Luckily, it's right there. Okay, so here's the Bulletproof Bookkeeping QBO company. I don't have these projects in here. So like I said earlier, we're going to find out. I'm pretty sure it'll add them when I go to do the import. There's settings in SaasAnt where you can decide whether it will give you an error or just add new elements if it doesn't see it in there already, right? So we're going to go over to SaasAnt here. I've already gone through the process of adding the Bulletproof Bookkeeping company in SaasAnt and linking it up in QBO, right? So that's all done already. Actually, it's telling me it lost the connection, so I'm going to connect it again. But if you've ever connected an app to QuickBooks, then you know how to do this part, you know, and it looks just like this. So I have a couple of different firms going on in here, so I have to pick this one. Actually, this one. And then the client is Bulletproof Bookkeeping, and next. And connect. Success. So that's how easy it is to get SaasAnt connected. Okay, and then from my Windows Explorer window, let me actually, you don't really need to close the file, but I like to do it anyway just to make sure. And then I'm going to click and drag the Excel file here. Okay, and we'll click Submit. Okay, so we're going to be using, everything's coming off the timesheet. So this is the tab I want to select to work with. And remember, we're going to be doing this twice. The first time we do it, we're going to do the bills. The second time we do it, we're going to do the invoices to the customers, right? So here, right? So let's do the bills first. Okay, and I'm going to switch to Neomapping. That's their new version of the mapping. And it's a lot cleaner. It's just really nice, as you'll see. Okay, so the bill number, right? On the left, we're seeing the QuickBooks attribute. On the right, we're seeing what's in the Excel file, right? So where's the bill number going to come from? I probably didn't even do something for that, so I probably need to. Which brings up an important point, actually. Let me bring this back in. That was one of the things I actually had to add with my client this week, because we realized one of the things that's important to note is, let's say, for example, you know, I'm going to be, what do you call it? I'm going to be paying Nerd Enterprises, Inc. for 2 different entries, right? I don't want 2 separate bills for that. I want those to go on the same bill. So actually what I want to do is sort by the contractor company in this case. That's interesting. Let's try that again. Okay, perfect. I sorted weird at first. So we want to make sure these are together, because then we do need a column for the reference number, right? Actually, let's call this bill number so we can distinguish, and then we need a column for the invoice number for when we're invoicing the client, right? So for Nerd Enterprises, to make sure that these 2 get added to the same bill, they just need to have the same bill number, which is what we're going to use here, right? So we can call it NE-1, something like that, right? Or we can just do straight up, just to keep things simple, 1, 2, 3, 3, right? And then 4, right? So we just need to make sure that the things that are going to go on the same bill, and at the same rate when we're doing the invoices, the things that are going to go on the same invoice have to have the same number, right? And for that matter, while I'm here, and just to keep it simple, I'll use the same numbers on both sides, right? Right, because again, this is what's going to go on the bill that's going to be paid for the payable side. This is what's going to go on the invoice to the customer that's on the receivable side. So now I'll save that. And we'll go back into SaasAnt, and I have to start over. So I'm just going to say, actually, I'll just go straight up here to New Import. clear uploads, because obviously SaasAnt doesn't know about those changes I've just made, so I have to re-upload the file. So drag it in and submit. And this, by the way, is the process you're going to have to go through when you're doing the mapping, right? So we're going to do the timesheet, and the QuickBooks entity, what we're actually doing this for right now is the bills, right? So we're going to create bills. Okay, and now it starts to recognize right away the bill number is going to pull from the column called bill number in the file. It knew exactly what to do there. The vendor is going to be the contractor company, right? And what you'll want to do is you'll want to be very clear about how you name your columns so that this part gets very easy. If I just put company here, then I'm like, well, wait, is this the contractor that I'm paying, or is this the customer that I'm going to be billing, right? So contractor company, and then it gives me the sample. It's pulling from the very first line of my Excel file. So it shows me, okay, so for the first line, I'm going to get the bill number from the bill number column, which happens to be the number 1. And for the vendor, based on it being based on the contractor company, it shows me that numbers guy, right? The AP account, there should be only one. So I'm going to do an override here, and we're going to call it accounts payable. But I never want a chance like having a typo on something like that. So we're going to go here, and I'm going to copy it in, because you know what I might have done? I might have just typed accounts payable and forgot that the actual account in QBO is termed with A/P in parentheses, right? So you need to be very, very specific and literal about that. So we do the override, and then in here I paste that in, right? And over here it gives me, kind of the answer. It says, okay, so we've got that accounts payable account. What's the date? I didn't put a date in the file. There probably should have been. I know there was from Plutio originally, right? But maybe what I'll do here is I'll add bill date, right? Invoice date. Actually, we're probably going to be the same on both sides, right? So let's just do date, right? And we'll put it all in for today, right? Because I'm going to bill everybody, and I'm going to put in the bills to pay everybody at the same time. Okay, so now I got to go back and start over at SaasAnt, but what I'm going to do first is up at the top of my screen in SaasAnt, we're going to save the mapping. And I'm going to call this AP import, right? Because what we're setting up here is for the payable side. I'll click save, success, new import, clear uploads, right? In the Excel file, I just want to make sure this is saved before I drag it over. Drag it in, submit. Bills. This part's going to be time consuming setting up the mapping, but once it's done, the mapping's saved, and like I said earlier, it takes literally 2 seconds to drop a file in and do the import, right? So the bill date is near the end. The columns follow the order as they appear in the spreadsheet from left to right. From top down, it's left to right. So there's my date. The due date I don't care about. I'll let the terms, kind of dictate that, right? These aren't required, so I'm going to leave them blank. Okay, the category account, where are these going to? For the bills that we're paying, I just need like subcontractor expense, right? If there's going to be different category accounts for the different bills, then you'll need to put that in the file so you can map it accordingly, right? So here I have a cost of goods sold account called subcontracted labor. So we'll just use that. Again, I always copy and paste this stuff so that there's no chance of a typo screwing me up. Okay, and now it finds that. The category description I don't care about. The line amount, of course, is this total. This is a bad example of how I name the column header, right? Because again, I don't know, I know because I built the spreadsheet, right? But it wouldn't necessarily be totally obvious that the total is really the total amount that's being paid to the contractor. So when you're not sure, you just go back here and make sure that it is right. So here the total is 525, right? And so to term this better, it should be total paid to contractor or something like that, just so it's so clear when I'm working with this in SaasAnt, right? So the next time I drag the file over, that's the name of the column that'll show. It'll be ridiculously clear that that's the right column to choose. I'm not going to start over just for that one thing, right? Don't care about billable because I'm going to be importing the invoices. I don't need to like mark it billable, right? I'm not going to do a markup. I'm not going to deal with any of that stuff. Now the customer I have, right? That is going to be the customer. So this way I've got the bill tagged to the customer, right? I've got it sort of job costed. We're not going to do anything with class. We're not using products or services. I could, if I wanted to, in the Excel file, I could add a column here and just map the product or service items instead of using, the account that I use for subcontracted labor, right? So again, I'm keeping it pretty simple for today, but I want you to be aware that you have these options and flexibility so you can make this very powerful and robust, right? You could use products or services for the bills that you're paying so that they could be compared if need be, or you can have like two-sided items, so to speak. So if you want to use the same product or service for the customer, right, that you're billing for the same thing, and then you can get some nice reporting out of that. So just remember that these options are all here. This can be, infinitely more complex than what I'm showing you today. Okay. So I don't need anything to do with products or services because I'm doing it direct to the account, right? I don't care about the mailing address or any of that. That should be set up in QuickBooks for the vendor anyway, right? And then I'm not going to mess with any of this stuff either. So I'm basically done. Now I just want to save the mapping again. And as long as you don't change the mapping name, it knows and it will override the existing save mapping, right? You can always check by clicking this drop down and making sure you didn't create like a new one, okay? So now what we do, whenever we think we're ready to import something in SaasAnt, we click down here at the bottom right where it says review, and it's yelling at me, category customer depends on category account, please map the fields. Category account is mapped. So it doesn't like something about what I'm doing here. So let's just pull that out for now. Save the mapping, save. All right, I'll have to go back and troubleshoot that to see why it didn't like. I was just trying to job cost it to the customer and it didn't like it. So let's go to review. And then from the review screen here, you'll click more and preview. In the previous screen, you can access a preview option, but it doesn't do what this does, and I'll explain. What this does is it shows you the sample data and exactly where it's going to appear on the bill. So you can confirm that things are mapped properly, that they're going to show up in the right places. And so once I can see that that's looking like it's going to work.
It's interesting they still use the old user interface.
Yeah, I guess they haven't updated that. But now I'm ready to hit upload. So let's do it. And let's see. It's going to think, and it's going to show me a progress bar. If it's green, we're good. If it's red, it means it's found errors, but we still let it finish. And it doesn't mean
that it was, you had all of your blank rows were checked.
Yeah, that probably is going to create a problem. Yeah, I probably needed to. Yeah, so 94 records failed to import. Those are all the blanks, right? So you see how it says 5 importers failed partially, 5 records were imported because there were, I think, 5. Yeah, so there's 5 lines total. Right, so all of it worked. Now let's jump over to, I can click show results just so you can see what I'm talking about. So there's a bunch of blank rows. So good point, Greg. What I should have done before the import, like the template, I might leave room for 100 rows, but before I'm ready to do the import, of course, I'll save a copy of the template, and then I want to delete all the blank lines because that's what it did. It was trying to import blank lines. Okay, so I can skip this basically. Like I'm not going to upload the failed lines. Let's go to QuickBooks. And first of all, let's go to customers. Which entering, oh, we didn't get any customers in there because I didn't end up actually mapping those customers, but the projects, I didn't map the projects. That's what's missing. Let's go to an unpaid bills report. So vendors, where am I? I can never find things because they keep changing the way it's done. Actually, let's go to reports. and unpaid bills. All right, so we have some stuff in here from some other samples that I've done, but I know there's Parkway Drive Race Solutions, right, for his 516250. Okay, there's something to me for 3,500. And there's, so that's something else. That's unrelated to what we just imported. Notice this is dated 6/1. The 7/15 ones are the ones we just imported. So there's Nerd Enterprises, right? But we didn't get the, what I really want to do is get the projects in there, right? So I want the customer project to go in. So watch what we can do now. I'm going to go to delete over here in SaasAnt. And I can just tap search, already imported files, right? So there's the one. I'm going to check it off. And down here, I'm going to choose delete. All right, so it successfully deleted it. I'll close out of here. And notice those bills are all gone now, right? So that's one of the things I love about SaasAnt is if I didn't get the results I wanted, I can pull it out. And then now let's go fix it. So let's go new import. We're still working with the same sheet. We're still doing bills. Actually, let me start over because this way I'll eliminate the problem of those extra lines now that I've deleted those. So we're going to clear uploads. Watch how smart SaasAnt is. First, let me save this. And then I want to do one other thing here. Actually, let's try this. So let's drag the file in. It warns me, duplicate file upload. It recognizes, hey, you've already tried to import this file, but I'm going to click OK because I understand I want to import it again. Okay. We're going to do bills. And here's what I'm going to do. Let's go back over to QuickBooks here for a minute. Let's go to customers. And let's just quickly build the customer database that we need. So I need these guys. So I need that numbers guy. So let's just add him in quickly as a customer.
Everybody needs that numbers guy.
That's right. Oh, you're already in here, apparently. Probably as a vendor. As that numbers guy, though? Oh. Hold on a second. Then why isn't it showing you? Great. I love getting kicked out. Go away. So it says that numbers guy is already in here. Oh, that's right. You're the vendor. Duh. That's the contractor company. I need the customer in here. So we have a customer called Organized Client. I'll save it. Okay, back to customers. Let's also get rid of the inactive in the projects. Okay. We have a compliance client. Okay, and then we have forward-thinking accountant. And we have big money maker. Now we have to create, I'm not going to do projects, I'm going to do sub-customers for the projects. So let's go back here. Of course, if I had a lot of these to add, I would have just done a different kind of import to do it. All right, so now we have
Does
organizational.
it work with projects as does on the import? Does it work as easily with projects as it does with sub customers?
Yeah, you just have to make sure you're mapping it to a project and not a sub customer. So, all right, organizational consulting goes with the customer organized client. Save. Bulletproof CFO. Goes to forward thinking accountant. QQQ loans. Goes to compliance client. I did that one, and then tax planning goes to big money maker. So when you have it all set up and you've confirmed that you have it all set up properly ahead of time, what that does is it allows you to, you only need to map the sub customer, and SaasAnt, the way it works with QBO's API, it will find it and figure that part out. So now that I've done that, now that I've taken the time to do that, I can just map the project you'll see as the customer. I think you can actually map both in SaasAnt, so let's find out. So when I brought the updated file over, it's you know, it remembers the mapping. It can recognize that this looks a lot like an AP import type file, right? But now what we want is we want to do the mapping. So I need the line item for the customer. All right, first of all, we need the category. I don't need the line amount, or do I? Yeah, I do. The category line amount is going to be my total, right? My total billing. All right, $750 in this case. Is that right? No, that's to the customer. It needs to be total paid to contractor. That one. All right, so now the category customer is going to be the project. You know what, Greg? It doesn't look like it gives you the ability to map to a project, because the first column here is the QuickBooks attribute, and there's nothing here for project.
Right.
If we switch to the old mapping, there might be a way. I've noticed there's still some functionality differences there. If you switch back to the classic mapping, you might be able to do it there. Okay, so we've got the account is going to all go to subcontractors expense. The category line amount is going to be that. The project, just want to review and make sure we're getting everything right. So we've got the bill number, the contractor company, the AP account, the date, category account is done, the line amount, none of that. This is going to project, and nothing to do with the products and services here, and nothing to do with any of this stuff. Great, let's save the mapping. Customer, category customer depends upon category account. Please map the fields.
Keep going down a little bit. Category customer depends on category account.
So I think somehow what it's saying is I can't do an override for the category account. I have a feeling it's a little bug, but let's test that theory, right? So let's go here, and for the category account, actually, I want this subcontractor expense. So all I'm going to do is stick that in here. subcontracted labor. All right. And then we'll go new import. And then clear uploads. Make sure that's saved. Bring it in. Duplicate files good. Submit. So now the category account is going to be category account. So we get rid of that. I want to just kind of delete that out. Let's reset this. I don't like that this has a choice in it. All right, well, as long as this is there, that should be the way. So now it's getting subcontracted labor. Category line amount is total paid to contractor. And the category customer is actually going to be the project. See, that worked. It's just a dumb little thing. Of course, now we got to test it. So we're going to go to review and more and preview. And see, it's putting organizational consulting right where I want it, right? That was the project. So it looks like it's going to work perfectly. Let's close it and upload it. And this time we should have no errors because we got rid of the blank lines. Boom. Unpaid bills. There's DKK Accounting's 1225. Let's click in there. Right? See what it did? I only had tax planning in there, but like I said, it's smart enough to figure that out. It sees that there's a tax planning sub-customer under big money maker. Went to subcontracted labor. We have the total amount there. So everything worked perfectly. Let's check the others. There's Nerd Enterprises. Went in there and see what it did. Remember we had 2 line items for this, right? So it was able to split it up exactly because I put the bill number there. Like I said earlier, having the same bill number on 2 lines, and as long as those rows are adjacent in the import file, then it knows to combine those onto a single transaction, right? These are actually for
So if there was something else
If
in between, it would not import it?
It wouldn't, no, because it needs to see them next to each other, right? Because it's processing each line one at a time. And by the way, what I should have also done was mapped the person from the file into the description. So in the bill, you can see that this is one for me, one for Melissa.
But what would it have done? Would it have errored out? Saying
No, it would have just created 2 separate bills.
both with number 3.
Yes, both with the number 3. You might have gotten an error for the duplicate bill number, but I'm not sure if you would actually.
but if you have like hundreds of these, hundreds of lines, you need it seems like it'd be like totally too tedious to enter the bill number. You want it. I envision a scenario where you want it to import to QuickBooks. You want it to get the latest bill number in QuickBooks and go forward with it.
Yeah, it depends.
And yet have a multi-line on it. So
every situation is going to be different. So like in my IT guy's case, he had lots of lines that were tied to the same vendors. So he wanted to manually create the number because he wanted to group them. It was also part of his way of reviewing the data to make sure everything looked right. But certainly you could just, like you said, Melissa, start with the next available number and increment them by 1. But then you'll have to go back to determine where are there line items that you want grouped in the same transaction, because those you'll need to change so that they have the same number, right? So at the end of the day, you can write formulas to create logic for these kinds of things, but it's not going to be that tedious, even with 100 lines, to figure out which. You can write a simple formula that checks if the customer, in this case, if the vendor is the same 2 lines in a row, then use the same number. Otherwise, increment it by 1. Right? You can build logic into your formulas in the template to address that kind of stuff. Or you could just kind of code things here accordingly. right? So, and a lot of times, like when it gets output from Plutio, you might even have some kind of a reference number that you can leverage, right? Or I can do some kind of a convention that says, you know, use the contractor company or some abbreviated version of it in the bill number. You know, in other words, there's a number of ways you can approach this to automate it. But at the end of the day, and there's no getting around this, if I want these two lines to show up in the same bill, they need to have the same bill number. That's the only way. Right now, what you could do is, you know, you're going to have the same date, right? Because these are all dated today. So you can create a bill number based on today's date, right? And that way it's not going to put all these on the same one, because it's only going to combine them into a single transaction if it's the same exact vendor, right? And then as long as it's the same exact vendor and the bill number is the same, then it's going to combine them into a single transaction. So if you really need a quick way to make that grouping happen automatically, then set the bill number up based on the date. And always you have to make sure that it's sorted by vendor. Does that make sense?
Almost.
So again, if my main concern is I don't want to have to spend time tweaking the bill numbers to group things that I want on the same transaction, then I create a column that's got today's date on it, right? And that in 2 seconds, I can populate a column with today's date, just like I did here. And then for the bill number on all of these, I just say, make it equal to today's date, or just take today's date and copy it down the whole bill number column, right? That's all.
Yeah,
In other words,
I did an import for some sales receipts, and I'm thinking I did something where it worked off the names. It had to have the names on there,
it
and
has
then
to have the same name,
a
but
multi-line.
to combine it into a single transaction, it also has to have the same number. Because what if you didn't want them in a single transaction? What if you had reasons for wanting it to create two separate bills for this, right? The only way it's going to know that for the same name you want them on a single bill is that you have the same bill number, the same reference number that you're using for it. If you find out otherwise, playing around with it, let me know. But this has been my experience.
All right, I will.
Right? Because, and then otherwise what you need to do is just come up with some kind of a formula for the bill number that's going to use something that you know can be applied consistently, you know, so that you have the same number across the board. Some convention, maybe something that combines the date and the customer name, or, you know, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, you might have to get a little creative on that one. Okay, and then let's very quickly do the import of the invoices using the same file, because we're actually out of time. All right, so let's go new import. We're using the same file. We're still using the same timesheet, but this time the QuickBooks entity is going to be an invoice. What is it doing? Oh, all right. That's annoying. I have to actually clear the uploads to reuse the same sheet. All right, so now for invoice, we have an invoice number. For the customer, we have the actual customer, which is organized client. Here, I know, I'm almost certain we're going to have a separate thing for the sub-customer, I believe. If not, well, yeah, because we're going to need to pick the projects which we set up as sub-customers, right? So actually, for the customer, we're going to use project. Okay. For the invoice date, we're going to use the same date we use for the bills. Okay, I don't care about the due date, the terms, payment method, any of that. Now the product or service, I didn't really define in the file. So in reality, probably based on the project or the task, we should have a product or service in there. So what I'm going to do for now is just do a quick override, right? So let's see what my products and services are here. Right, we'll just use this services. So everything's going to the same products or services. Obviously, I would never normally do that. I would map a column, you know, with the different products and services I'm going to want to use. Which again, going back to your last sort of concern, Melissa, there's, you know, the way you would do that to do it automated is to go back to, you know, the original file, and you would have to build a way of having a column that actually is going to populate the product or service, and then making sure those same products or services are set up properly in QBO. I'd be inclined to use this task column, right? But if coming out of Plutio, like in my client's case, you have all kinds of tasks for all different kinds of things, and you don't want all that detail, then I'd probably create a lookup table listing all the different tasks in Plutio, and then just kind of mapping them in the lookup to a smaller, broader list of things, and then using that drop down or that column in here that these tasks are ultimately mapped to as the products or services that I'd map to, right? So again, it can get a lot more complicated. So I'm using an override for the product or service. And I think for now we can keep this fairly simple. We don't need a whole lot of extra detail on this. Let's go to review and preview. So again, we've got the project there really, right? My invoice date, my invoice number. Okay, we've got the products or services. It only shows you the first line. It's not going to show you every line on what the invoice is going to look like, right? But all that looks like it's coming in. Let's run the upload real quick. It's 5 lines. You would think it'd be much faster than this. There it goes. Files imported successfully. By the way, once that happens, you can click here in the search to see the recent transactions, and you'll find them. You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to tell it where to get the amount from. So they're all 0. So let's delete that. All right, so we want to delete this most recent one.
It's my favorite thing about SaasAnt. Delete.
Yeah, it's great.
Totally undo. Yeah.
All right, and watch this trick. Once this is done, all right, let's go new import. It's going to make me clear the uploads again. Okay, so here's what I want to do. Where's my amount? All right, so the product or service amount. Now remember, I don't have the hours laid out the way I'd really need them to in the file. So I'm going to get it to effectively back into that by grabbing the total amount, right? So that's total billing. Okay, and then I'm also going to have it look up the rate. Now the rate is not the hourly pay rate, but it's the customer's rate, which let me look back at the file to figure out what that was. Customer rate. That is what that's called. So the rate is going to be customer rate. So it should back into the quantity based on these two pieces of information, right? We'll test that theory out. And let me save this mapping. This is going to be the AR import and save. And I'm not going to review it this time because I know it worked the first time. The only difference was I needed the amounts in there. Successful import. Now we've got invoices with amounts. And interesting, it didn't back into the quantity, which is weird. I have a rate and an amount. Was that the right amount though? The total billing should have been 750. Did I pick the wrong column? Let's check another one. This one I got 73.75 for the QQQ loans. That's right, and the rate was 500. Oh, I see what's happening. I got to be careful when I click in there. It resets the amount. So that's all. It does come in with the right amounts. Let me go back to that first one. Yeah, it was 750, which was correct. But if I click into the amount, it's going to recalculate. So I guess it doesn't back into the quantity. As soon as I click in here, it changes the amount. So let's see if it probably actually would have been well, here's what we'd need to do to fix that, is we would need to add a column that's going to effectively give us the right quantity to use. So here's how we'll do it. Let's, right here, hours, right? Hours for the quantity. Right, and that's just going to be total minutes divided by 60. Make sure we've got decimals in there. Save that. Back over to SaasAnt. We'll delete the last import and do it again. Because that's precarious. You don't want to leave something like that in there. Okay. So just make sure, yep, invoices are all gone. Perfect. New import. Clear the uploads. Make sure it's saved. And by the way, everything you're seeing, this is how you perfect the process to get the exact results you want. Because like I said at the beginning, once this is built, it's just going to be drag, drop, click, and upload. So now we do have a column, of course, for the quantity. So I'm going to choose that, hours quantity. And I can leave all the rest of that in there. That's fine, right? That all makes sense. If the quantity is 1.5 and the rate's 500, the total 750. All right, that's all I needed to do. Save the mapping and import. All right, it didn't like 2 of my records. Let's see what happened. All right, so that's a problem when you actually try to map all three fields of quantity, rate, and total. So really what I should do is just map quantity and rate and leave the total out of that. So what we're going to do, I'll delete it once more. Normally I would just fix those two lines and then fix the mapping. This is fine, not going to need to change anything else here. All right, new import, clear uploads, drag it. So in the area there, we're going to do the hours and the rate. I'm going to pull out the total. Let the total calculate based on the hours and the rate. And that should work. Beautiful. Now if I go in, I'll pick on this big one. It's got everything perfectly. So now I don't have to worry about if I click in, it's going to mess up my amount, right? That is the difference between bulletproof and not bulletproof, right? If I had left it the way it was originally working, I run too much of a risk that somebody opens the invoice, clicks in, and it resets the amount. So this is the way to do it. We map the quantity and the rate, and the amount gets calculated from there. So that, my friends, is both sides of it. So, and again, now that that process is built, next time we did it, all I'd have to do is copy and paste the data into the template. And we might have to do some tweaking with the bill numbers and what have you to get things grouped the right way on the same transaction. You know, so at the most, maybe 15 minutes of work on that file before it's ready to be imported. And then it's pretty much drag, drop, click, and import, and you're done. And in a case like this, we can get all of our billing done and get all of our contractor bills in based off the same file, you know, in literally just minutes. So that's the key. That's why I love using SaasAnt. There's a lot of times that I would that I even prefer using a process like this with SaasAnt over some of the integrations that are out there. Because either the integrations have so many settings that it's too easy to get, you know, to get the data screwed up along the way, or the integrations just don't work well, you know, or both, right? That's a big problem I've had with a lot of integrations is just all the settings and all the little things you have to watch. I have a lot more control when I have, you know, when I have a few spreadsheet skills in terms of being able to manage the data in my spreadsheet template. And so I can easily that way pull data out of one place, drop it into a template. The template does all the heavy lifting, and then I'm ready to import it into QuickBooks Online. Once again, turning hours into minutes. Any questions?
We love turning hours into minutes.
It's one of my favorite things to do, especially when I'm billing a flat rate every month. Susan, was that helpful? Did that all make sense?
Yep, you're muted.
I'm going to have to listen to it again.
Right. I know it's a lot.
And what I'm going to need to do is export it from one QBO file and put it into another QBO file.
Right. Now, SaasAnt does have the export option. So you'll probably want to try that because in all likelihood, whatever you're exporting out of the one file, SaasAnt will export it in a format that's ready to be imported into the new QBO company. So
making it even easier.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. There should be little to no prep needed on that Excel file, right? Because it'll pull it out exactly the way it needs to be.
Yep. Thanks.
All right, folks. I will see you all around sometime soon, somewhere soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.